and during that interview, he made a major revelation. He told us that more than 1,000 accusers contacted his firm, saying they've been sexually assaulted by P. Diddy at some point over the past 3 decades. During that same interview, Tony Busby told us there were other celebrities involved in these alleged sex crimes, and he said these suits plan to name drop in the future. So when Jane Doe initially filed the lawsuit, P. Diddy was the only celebrity she listed, but in December, she amended that paperwork to include one other name, Sean Carter. You probably know him as Jay-Z. Jane Doe says she was raped by both P. Diddy and Jay-Z in September of 2000. At that point, she was only 13 years old. According to her lawsuit, Jane Doe first met Diddy's limo driver outside of the MTV Video Music Awards in New York. The driver apparently told her that she fit what Diddy was looking for, so he invited her to an after party. Jane Doe says that this driver picked her up later that night and drove her to a large white house that was behind a gated fence. Once they were inside, Jane Doe was then forced to sign an NDA, but she says she never got a copy of that paperwork. According to her lawsuit, Jane Doe says she saw celebrities, drug use, and underage drinking all inside this party. And Jane Doe herself actually had a drink too. She later described it as a reddish-yellow mixture, and she said it tasted like orange juice mixed with cranberry juice and something bitter. Jane Doe says she started to feel woozy after having some of this drink, which she now believes was spiked by either P. Diddy or one of his associates. When she started to feel off, Jane Doe says she went to a room that she thought was empty, but kept the door unlocked. Not long after, she says, P. Diddy, Jay-Z, and a female celebrity who's listed as Celebrity B all came into the room. Jane Doe alleges that Jay-Z raped her first, as Diddy and this Celebrity B watched. And then after Jay-Z was done, she said Diddy raped her, and Jay-Z and Celebrity B watched this too. When the assault was over, Jane Doe says she ran from this big white house to a nearby gas station, and after that, her dad picked her up. So Jane Doe laid this all out in her lawsuit, but got into even more detail in an interview on December 13th. Jane Doe appeared on NBC. She still didn't reveal her true identity, but she did give us some conflicting info. Jay-Z's team followed up on the inconsistencies between Jane Doe's lawsuit and her interview and laid them all out in emotion. To start, Jane Doe says the night of the assault, she spoke with Good Charlotte singer Benji Madden about his tattoo of the Last Supper, because she has a religious background, so it was something to talk about. But according to Jay-Z's team, Benji Madden wasn't even in New York at the time of the 2000 VMAs. Instead, he was halfway across the country in the Midwest on tour with his band Good Charlotte. This same motion called out Jane Doe's alleged getaway from the party because her father apparently didn't pick her up. This is from Jay-Z's motion too. Quote, he, meaning Jane Doe's father, told NBC he was unaware of his daughter's assault allegation until the week he was interviewed. NBC reported that he has no recollection whatsoever of picking up plaintiff, meaning Jane Doe, on the night of the VMAs. And plaintiff and her father were living in Rochester at the time, which would have required her father to drive more than 5 hours from their home to pick her up on the night in question, an event that no father would forget if it actually happened. When pressed by NBC, plaintiff Jane Doe was forced to admit, I've made some mistakes. I may have made a mistake in identifying. Not all the faces there are as clear, and even that she was guessing about key details, including the time it took to reach the venue. What is more, she admits she does not have a single corroborating witness over the last 24 years. Jay-Z's team also pointed out this apparent location of the sexual assault doesn't quite add up. Jane Doe filed her lawsuit under the Victims of Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Act, or the GMV. That act was put into place in December of 2000. But Jane Doe says her alleged assault happened in September of that year. So Jay-Z's team says there's no way she could file under this GBM. But even if the timeline did add up, the alleged crime had to take place within the borders of New York City. According to the FAC, that's the First Amended Complaint, plaintiff was driven from Radio City Music Hall to a large white residence with a gated U-shaped driveway, a drive that took 20 minutes. This is where the alleged assault took place. The FAC's defense attorney's sleeve. And for that, we got to bring in law and crime legal analyst Julie Rendleman. So, Julie, right from the jump, is this a win for Jay-Z that he's now allowed to file this motion to dismiss?
It is certainly. Attention super markup shoppers, just a heads up. These loyalty cards with exclusive deals, it's a sham. At Aldi, you don't need one. You just walk in and save. That's why they're number one in everyday low prices. It's an Aldi thing.
I could make one call and you miss everything.
The open road. And nothing makes your ride more enjoyable than open road tolling from the PA Turnpike. Some might say, we're really driven.
Driven to make my ride a smooth one.
Driven to make the journey just...
This is your year to take control of your health. Through hers, you can get access to a prescription.
It is certainly a win compared to the loss they experienced in late 2024 when the judge ruled that the victim could remain anonymous. This gives them the opportunity to now move to dismiss the case, and they seem to have a decent argument that it'll be interesting to see what the strategy is on the part of the plaintiff's attorneys.
You mentioned that other motion that Jay-Z's team filed just last month. Basically, they were like, we know, we want to know what your real name is. And they said, we want that. And also, if that's not the case, we want the case completely thrown out. We don't want it at all. So I'm wondering what the difference is then when they were like, hey, we want this thrown out, versus now when they can actually have permission to file a motion. Can you explain that part?
So initially, the real focus was on Jay-Z's team trying to make sure that the complainant was no longer anonymous. And the judge said, well, for now, she can remain anonymous and will remain anonymous. It didn't mean that for the rest of the process she would remain anonymous, but for the time being, she would. And that was considered a loss on the part of Jay-Z's team. At the same time, they came out pretty strong with a PR strategy where they basically brought out all of the inconsistencies that the complaint had shown in terms of inconsistencies with her own father, inconsistencies in regards to potential witnesses. And so now they're at the next part of their strategy, which is to ask permission from the judge to file a motion to dismiss.
I want to talk about those inconsistencies because you're right, that's something that Jay-Z's team brought up, and it was pretty startling, at least to me. They pointed out the differences in Jane Doe's interview and then the filing that she originally had. There were some things that didn't add up. Some people, she said, were in New York. They weren't even in New York. They were in the Midwest, all of these things. So does that make for a strong argument for Jay-Z's team to have this completely thrown out?
So remember, the basis for the moving for dismissal at this point is separate and apart from the inconsistencies. The inconsistencies that we're talking about are more what comes out at trial, in terms of the cross-examination of the witness and the viability that the complainant would be successful in winning a case against Jay-Z. The filing we're talking about right now in regards to the motion to dismiss is on a different theory. What they're basically saying is that the law that allowed Busby, who is Jane Doe's attorney, to file this complaint, that law did not exist back in September of 2000 when these alleged incidents occurred. And therefore, the argument is if the law didn't exist, then you don't get the protections of that law, and therefore the case should be dismissed because the law was not retroactive to September of 2000.
I'm glad you brought that up because that is very specific, this law that they're going through, September 2000 versus December. And something they also brought up in all of that too is in order to use this law in any sort of civil suit, the incident would have to take place in New York City. And Jay-Z's team says this alleged incident happened in this big White House, nowhere in New York. It wouldn't have made sense. So those two things combined, do you think they make for a strong case for Jay-Z to have this completely thrown out?
So yeah, Sierra, and you added a great point because you're talking about the fact that she describes a home, and they were pretty thorough, Jay-Z's team, to say that there is no home that exists in New York in the area that she describes that would fit the description. So yes, that is another factor that they're going to bring up when they move their motion to dismiss.
Hey, all you business owners or anyone hoping to start a side hustle, I want to take a quick second and tell you about something that can seriously level up your business game. It's Odoo.com and their incredible accounting app. You know how sometimes keeping track of finances can get messy and confusing or overwhelming? Odoo makes it super simple. With their accounting app, you can manage invoices, expenses, and even get financial reports all in one place. Take a look at this clean interface. It's designed to save you time and reduce headaches. You can automate those repetitive tasks, which means you'll just have more time to focus on what you really love, growing your business. So if you want to take control of your finances and make your accounting life a whole lot easier, check out Odoo's accounting app at our link, odoo.com/lcnews33, and try Odoo for free today. So we have that. We know that Jay-Z's team is going to come forward with this motion, but then Jane Doe can respond. What would that look like?
So another great question. And I think, what Busby is going to be focusing on is what was the intent of that law? Was the intent of that law such that anyone who experienced some type of sexual criminal activity and was the victim thereof prior to December, therefore does not get the luxury of using that law? And so I think that's one of the arguments he's going to make. And then the second argument in regards to the inconsistencies is the ones that we expect. You don't expect someone to remember every single detail of what happened 20-something years ago. What you do expect is them to know the people that were involved and the crime that was committed against them. I think that is going to be a little tough because I do think Jay-Z's team has created and shown a ton of inconsistencies that one would expect someone to remember, especially if they're recalling a crime of this nature.
So let's say this does get completely thrown out and Jay-Z is no longer involved in this. What does that mean for P. Diddy? Because he's one of the defendants listed too. Would it be dismissed for just Jay-Z or altogether?
So I would assume that anything that Jay-Z's team brings up in terms of filing a motion to dismiss, P. Diddy's team will do the same. And so one would expect, if the facts are exactly the same as they are with regards to Jay-Z, that if it was dismissed in Jay-Z's case, it would be dismissed in P. Diddy's case. Quite frankly, I think Shaw Puppy becomes as much more to deal with than this civil case, and so I don't think it's of the utmost importance to him.
You're right. P. Diddy kind of has a lot on his plate with a slew of civil lawsuits, and of course we have those federal charges that are looming over his head. And Jay-Z, as of right now, only has this one suit that he's mentioned in. However, Tony Busby, you talked about him a lot throughout this interview. He said that celebrities are involved in other lawsuits that he's planning to file eventually. Is it possible that Jay-Z could be named again in a different suit?
It is, and if you remember what happened with P. Diddy, when we first started to hear about these civil suits, do you remember there was almost an avalanche of civil suits that came after? Jay-Z has been a bit different. We heard about this lawsuit. I think some people were having an expectation maybe there were more to come, and there wasn't. That doesn't mean they're not going to come, but it does seem to have a different trajectory so far than it did with P. Diddy.
I'm wondering if
Wawa's up and ready for you every morning with fresh coffee, hot sizzlies, and more. Mornings made easy.
Nickel Boys is one of the most celebrated movies of the year. It has now been nominated for 5 Critics' Choice Awards, including Best Picture of the Year.